It says literally in the Hebrew, how long will you halt between two opinions? You're paralyzed. When you're divided, you're paralyzed. You can't go anywhere. I want you to see this next one. Turn to Matthew 14. And I want you to see the event here. And Messiah is showing the disciples a miracle, walking literally on the waters. And verse 22, immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go ahead of them to the other side, while he sent the crowds away. After he sent the crowds away, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray, and when it was evening, he was there alone. But the boat was already long distance from the land, battered by the waves, for the wind was contrary. And in the fourth watch of the night, he came to them walking on the sea. When the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, and it said, "It's a ghost!" They cried out in fear. But immediately Yeshua, Jesus, spoke to them, saying, "Take courage, it's me, it's I. Do not be afraid." So Peter said to him, "Lord, if it is you," which is a strange sentence to say, "Lord, if it is you," well, who are you talking to? "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." And he said, "Come." And Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came toward Yeshua, Jesus. But seeing the wind, he became frightened and began to sink. He cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Yeshua stretched out his hand, took hold of him, and said to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" Notice what happens. When he saw it was Messiah, he walked. He came toward him. He was looking to him. And he's looking to him. He can walk on water. When you look to him, you can walk on anything. He's walking on water, looking, but he's not looking at the water. He's looking at him. But notice it says, but seeing the wind. I mean, first of all, you can't see the wind with your eyes, but with your mind you can. You could see it. You can see the effect of it. He took his mind off the Lord. He looked at the problem, looked at the thing going on, and he begins to fear and he begins to sink. He can't walk anymore. The miracle's over. The blessing is over. The advance is over because he's not looking at Messiah anymore. He's not looking at where he's going. He's looking at all the problems around him. Because of the wind, he could no longer walk triumphantly. He either focus on the problem and you don't walk, or you focus on the Lord and you forget the problem and you walk. Because of the wind. Paul said of his associate, Demas, in Colossians 4, verse 14, he said, "Luke, the beloved physician, and Demas greet you." So Demas was with Paul. But in 2 Timothy 4:10, Paul says something else. He says, "For Demas has left me, having loved this present world, and he took off for Thessalonica." Demas served with Paul, one of his fellow disciples, but something happened somewhere. We don't know the details. It's summed up by Paul, having loved this present world. Meaning he turned aside. He stopped following the Lord. He wanted, who knows, maybe he wanted to get money. He wanted to be comfortable. He didn't like traveling around like this. He loved the present world. He saw something while on a mission. He looked, his eyes wandered to something. Could be a woman, could have been something in the city. Maybe he wanted a relationship. Who knows, whatever it was, Demas was called to proclaim the gospel. That's where he was going. But he stopped looking where he was going. He turned his eyes to the side. He got caught up. And then once his eyes went, his whole life went. And therefore, he disqualified himself in the gospel. And if you want one of the most graphic illustration of this principle, you only have to look at one particular woman. We don't know her first name. We just know she was Mrs. Lot. Could have been Agnes Lot, Gertrude Lot. We don't know. We just know she's Mrs. Lot. Her calling was to get out of Sodom. Her future was with God. The command was, do not look back. She was going forward, but she looked back to where she wasn't going. And she ended up there frozen in the wilderness. A warning against looking back. You can't go forward if you are looking back. She wasn't looking where she was going. And when you don't do that, or when you do that, you cannot go where you're going. And when you dwell on the past, you end up paralyzed in the wilderness. And it's not just for people in the Bible. It's for anyone who follows the Lord. And it's for your life. You know, there's a man, Jimmy Swagger, and he was used of the Lord. I'm not saying we agree with everything, but he was used to win people to the Lord. He had an anointing in proclaiming the gospel, but he didn't look where he was going. He flirted with things that had nothing to do with where he was called to go. It took him off course. It took him off from the calling. And as it, and he ended up, so where you look, that's where you end up. How many cases of adultery start with the eyes? The man is called to his wife, and the wife is called to her husband. That's where they're going. And his eye, and it could be something even for a temporary, just a moment. The whole marriage, the whole family, the whole life is destroyed because they didn't look where they're going. They looked to where they were not going, and they crashed. There are ministers who start off seeking God.